We'll try this again. Last time Lewis wasn't able to get in here, so we'll give it another shot. Welcome to the Functional Podcast. I'm your host, Naudi Aguilar. Hope you're all doing well out there. Hope you're keeping it functional. Getting on top of your dysfunctions. I'm about to have a conversation with Lewis Ellery. He's a FP practitioner out of Australia in Brisbane. He's been doing great work out there. He's a physical therapist, and I'm going to have him kind of give a rundown of his experience transitioning from physical therapy to FP, and as well as some of the struggles that he finds employing his practice of FP and whatnot. But anyway, I'm going to bring him on right now. All right. Let's see. I think it should work. Lewis, what's up, dude?
Naudi, good man, yourself?
Good, hanging in there, man.
Yeah, got that update.
Staying busy, man. Staying busy. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely crazy at the moment. Turns out I'm too busy to update my app.
Yes, that's a good sign, bro. Busy's good. Busy's good, man. So, in case you guys don't know who Lewis is, he's based out of Brisbane. You have a couple facility out there, or one facility? What do you got going on right now?
We've just moved to a bigger facility.
Okay.
So the other one we're kind of pushing out, but the new one's probably about 4 or 5 times bigger than the
wow, okay. Holy smoke.
Yeah, which is awesome. Yeah.
That's crazy. So you have a background in physical therapy, correct? Like how long were you involved in physio?
So I graduated in 2011 or 2012, one of those years. So it's been about 6-7 full-time physio. And I found FP and started to make that transition to full-time FP. And then the last, I'd probably say, since I started the center, so about 2 years ago is when I completely transitioned to just purely doing FP.
That's crazy, man. How have you been finding times through COVID and whatnot? I know that Australia has been going through some extreme lockdowns and whatnot.
Yeah.
How have you been dealing with that?
Yeah, Brisbane, we're probably one of the luckiest cities. I know Melbourne especially, and Perth to an extent got smashed. They couldn't really do anything. We had an initial really, really strict lockdown, and then they eased the restrictions pretty quickly. So myself, I was able to work the whole way through with the physio background. I was classed as an assistant worker, which was really easy. The other guys that work at the centre, Shane and Max, they had to work from home for a little bit. But when they came back, just had strict practices after that, just all the regular social distancing, masks. So some of it was luck that we got busier, but yeah, no, we worked pretty during that time to kind of keep going.
That's crazy, man. So what's it like right now? Like, are there any signs that they're going to open back up? I know they're having problems administering vaccines and whatnot, right?
Yeah, Brisbane itself again is pretty good. We feel like up here we're kind of back to normal, and we're a bit separated from the other states. Like they seem to be going in and out of lockdown, in and out of restrictions. But Brisbane itself is really, we've only had since the initial April, May last, had 2 lots of 3-day, 4-day out where send the boys home. I can keep it on a schedule. You can only go out of the house just to get basic exercise per day. So we're pretty lucky, and that's only happened a couple of times. The vaccine side of things it seems to be rolling in slowly. All the workers have had it, all the pharmacists, hospital workers, and then for the moment it seems like, and anyone can correct me if they want to, but it seems like it's more of a choice thing still.
Yeah, out here it's kind of like it started to become kind of a topic of debate regarding like whether people should be wearing masks or not, because I mean they've already vaccinated. I mean, I guess it depends on what you want to call herd immunity, but if you look at like the statistics of the CDC and all that, I mean, we probably have to have about 50% of people who, like, if they haven't had it through vaccine, they've probably been exposed to it in some way. But right now, it's a big topic of debate as to whether people should be wearing masks or not. And that's like an interesting thing to me, because I remember like back in the day, the times that I've gone over to Europe, or not Europe, Asia, I'd always notice that people would be wearing masks, and I always ask the question, I'm like, when's that coming to us? Like, because eventually it's going to come around, and it's just funny that it's here. And I'm like, oh, it doesn't feel good it doesn't feel good to see this circumstance arising, and I'm hoping that we get past it a little bit sooner, man. But what have you felt? Has it kind of I'm assuming it's still kind of been a difficult process, probably having to run the business even throughout all this, right?
Definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, just sending the boys home and not being able to take on that extra caseload from their point of view was the hardest part initially. Like most of it seems like we went to online training for a bit.
Yep.
And that, for me, I enjoyed the last side of things, but the one-on-one with FP is so detailed, aware that really hard for me to get online. So I just find do the online stuff.
Hey, Lewis, I'm not sure. Are you guys reading that Lewis is cutting off by him? Like, it's almost like, I'd say like 1/3 of the words that you're saying aren't coming out. I'm wondering what the heck we could do about that. Let me see.
I could put some headphones on. That might help.
Hopefully, let's see if that. Yeah, sorry, man. It's just not. It's not working too well.
I might have to just hold the phone.
Yeah, let's see.
How's that? Is that a lot better?
Yeah, it's way better, bro. Yeah, so continue. We were talking about what was it? What were we talking about? You remember?
Oh, now I'm lost too.
Okay, yeah. I'm usually pretty brain fried with everything. It's like one topic after the other in my life. So
yeah.
My attention span's about the length of that, similar to a goldfish or whatever. But help us out here, guys, because it was important what he was talking about. You were doing online training, and you were saying that you were finding difficulties working with clientele online because FP is so specific, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. So yeah, I was doing a lot of stuff online, and I just found I could do it, but I just couldn't get through to people like I usually could. And don't get me wrong, I think it's not better than not doing it at all. And there's a lot of cracks around the world that are doing it really well. And I thought, look, they're all able to do it. I'm able to work in the center. I might as well just focus on just getting that as busy as I can. So
yeah, exactly.
The initial struggle for us was obviously making that transition with the guys not being able to work. Once we figured that out, we've really never done any marketing, which is kind of cool. I think in the first year and a half, I reckon we spent maybe $250, $300 on marketing in a whole year and a half. So that was awesome. And
yeah,
I attribute that down, obviously, like you guys are doing a ton of marketing where you guys are at, and that's helped massively. We get a lot of people messaging in and going, look, I didn't even know there was a center in Brisbane, and that's where the marketing will have to come in.
That's good.
But we've taken a real results-based mindset, which is something you've pushed the whole time you've had FP. So, I mean, I don't apologize. If you look at our Instagram, the FP Brisbane Instagram specifically, we only have results on there. Like, that's
awesome.
it.
Yep.
And eventually we know that we're going to have to do some marketing. We're just starting off with that process at the moment. We're changing stuff around the site, the social media. But I think people appreciate that. And especially in the time of COVID, 50% of my clients are probably athletes, and the other 50% are your regular Joes, Janes. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you're neurologically impaired, neurodegenerative disorders, excuse me. Yeah. And the regular Joes and Janes couldn't work and couldn't go to the gym, so they came to me. And the athletes couldn't travel overseas to play on tours, so they came to me. And it was kind of cool in Brisbane. We had this mindset where chronic and long-term health took priority, which was weird. I don't know if that happened everywhere in the world, but we definitely noticed it here, and we got a really good response during COVID.
That's amazing, man. Well, I'm happy to see that it's worked out for you. I know there's a lot of people who've actually attained a certain level of success during the time of COVID. It seems like maybe people became more concerned about their health with, the coronavirus breathing down their neck a little bit more. Did you find that to be the case? Like, because I'm in a bubble, man. Like, I work with the same people that I've pretty much worked with. I pretty much spend my time running this company. Like, for me, I'm working on product after product after product after product, like running through. I'm like, my house is just like filled with just different prototypes of different tools, and I'm just like, that's kind of my bubble on top of like working with a few people that I do. So I'm kind of in a bubble. I don't like, this is kind of like a recon mission that I'm having with you, and I'm like, okay, what's going on out there? What's the psychology of people? Like, what do you think was the psychology? How do you feel the psychology of people was before pre-COVID and post-COVID, did you notice a mental shift happen in people after the coronavirus came in? And where are they at now about a year later?
Definitely. Before COVID, we were in a smaller center, but we had a lot of foot traffic and we had a lot of people walking past. We posted a heap of our results up on the wall, just the standing neutral postures. And a lot of people would look, and then a lot of people would walk on. They'd go, oh, that looks interesting, but on I go. Throughout COVID, people were staring through the door. People were coming in the door. We were training clients. We were mid-training, and people would walk in the door and go, what are you guys doing? So, I mean, even just from that point of view, it seemed like it changed a little bit. Fast forward.
It's almost like they knew that you were intrinsically pushing health, but they were like, there's no crisis right now, so what the hell? But it was when the crisis came, it's like, oh, maybe we'll hit you guys up.
Yeah, I've got to sort my stuff out now that this is happening. Yeah, we definitely got that view once COVID started to hit, and even continuing into now. We've kept most of those clients, which is really cool. A lot of them have become longer term clients, and they've got them out of pain, and now we're trying to get them to move dynamically a lot better.
Awesome.
But even new clients coming in the door, we don't have to sell them as much, which is really cool. So obviously that might be a part to just more marketing, FP's getting bigger around the world. But we don't have to seem to convince them to stop doing other stuff. We don't have to seem to convince them to just do functional patterns for a while and see if that changes them, if that makes sense.
And that's one thing that I'll say. It's like, I never wanted a pandemic. I still don't want a pandemic. All it's doing is just causing more problems. I'm not a fan of it, but I guess if there is a silver lining that I've seen out of it, it's been a good reset button. It's not just for the people that we train or people that come in through the doors, for myself too. I feel like it made me a lot better of a person. It made me really have to sit there and evaluate, do I really believe in the hoopla that I sell every single day? And am I really going to stand by it even through times of duress when you don't really know what COVID is? Like in the very beginnings, we didn't know how bad it was going to be. I had every suspicion in the world. I felt that it was going to be extremely contagious, but not have necessarily a high lethality rate, but because it was so contagious that it could have a high lethality rate. And for the most part, it kind of validated my assertions in terms of what the percentiles of deaths would actually happen. But nonetheless, you never know. And you want to make sure that you're taking care of your health a lot more. And I feel that, I feel as though it also helped me, man. And so how are people's thoughts now? Because they probably don't necessarily feel extremely protected do people feel like they're protected by the vaccine now? Or are they still concerned about their health? Where are people's perspectives are at right now?
Well, I think when that initial wave hit, especially in Australia, everyone went through that fear cycle. Yeah. Everyone went through that.
Horrifying.
I was staying up at night. I was thinking about it. I'm like, as you said, after a while, it's like, if you keep doing this, but there's nothing you can really change at the moment, what's that going to do to you? It's probably going to have a negative effect in the long term. You're going to have a crazy stress response. I'm not sleeping as well. Yep. So as people dulled from that kind of fear cycle, I think it turned into, in Brisbane especially, we were shielded a lot from it. We saw what was happening over in America, and we were over here just going, what? We couldn't even imagine what's happening. And some of that would turn to complacency, probably in Brisbane. People were going, this is nothing. Well, look, there's still, regardless of whether you think this thing is the reason people are dying or whether there's comorbidities, there's people dying. There's a lot of people dying. So in Brisbane, there was a lot of, it went the other way. So we kind of bounced up and down from fear to then complacency. And it seems to have found somewhere in the middle ground now. Even though obviously you're in this crazy bubble where you're surrounded by these people that are fully in, we're still in somewhat of a bubble here where, I've done FP for 5 years now, same as Shane and Max, the guys that work with us. So we're in somewhat of a bubble where we know that improving your long-term health will help to some extent. Who knows how much, but we know it will help. And the clients coming in, I don't know if all of them know that. So we get a little glimpse into it. But we still are shielded a bit, knowing that if we keep working on ourselves, that's the best strategy to keep improving long term.
Absolutely. And that's the way I feel about it too, is I think it's so often people, I've been trying, because I've been looking at investment recently and whatnot, just because it's I don't know if you've gone into the crypto space or anything like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like everybody's on it these days. I was very hesitant to doing it before. I was very, very stubborn about it because I'm like, oh, I hate money. The concept of money is annoying, and it's like you're trying to mechanize money. Like really, it's an abstraction. And so I was like, so I got into it and I started understanding investment and whatnot. And so when I've spoken to people about it, the way I always kind of try explaining it is I'm like, you know what? Everybody will tell you that you need to have a long-term investment strategy for anything that you do, but they never really think about that with the body. They just kind of figure, you know what, I'm going to train my body and then get ready for whatever, some wedding in 3-4 months or 5 months or this party or whatever it may be, and then just literally destroy my body on that day, and then thereafter, who cares about whatever it may be? It seems like the idea of investment into our body, or that you could have biological wealth, or you know, like that people don't think about it in that perspective, and they should take into consideration that you can prepare. That you just like you can prepare for a difficult financial circumstance, you can prepare for a difficult metabolic circumstance depending on how you do things. And so on my end, that's what my whole life has kind of been around. I remember like a while back, because I kind of tend to give off somewhat of a cynical vibe with how I am and but I don't feel like I'm cynical. I think I'm just realistic about a lot of the things that I talk about. And I used to tell people, you know, like I'm preparing for some kind of I mean, thank goodness that COVID wasn't more lethal than what it is, because that would have, if it had, what would you call it? If you carried that asymptomatically for about 2-3 weeks and then it had a higher death rate, that would be like
game over.
It'd be done. Like we'd be talking about like a good percentile of the population just being gone. And so on my end, I'm like, well, thank goodness that didn't end up popping up. But it's like, I've always thought in the realm that it's like one day something like that's going to hit us. And so on my end, I think it helped take the sting off of it a lot more for me. It's not to say that I wasn't like horrified by it. I cried. I was like, what the hell, dude? Like, what's our world coming to? It was a horrible experience. But obviously it took me about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I pretty much got over it for the most part. I was kind of over it. And I said, okay, fortunately I prepared for this. And I think that people should really take that into consideration, that you don't have to be a victim to a circumstance like this if you prepare in advance. If you don't think about this in a reactionary standpoint and you focus more on prevention, that's probably the best defense that you're going to have against something. I guess you can rely upon a vaccine. I'm not pro or against vaccine. I'm still kind of like up in the air. I'm not going to take it personally. I don't feel like I need to, and I'm sure some people are going to be like, what the hell, man, and whatever. But I feel like I've prepared for it, so I'm not, if I get it, I'll just make sure I get out in the sun. And vitamin D is directly linked to being able to shut coronavirus down, and I make sure I get plenty of sun. So I'm not too worried about it. But, yeah, man, I feel that people underplay and undervalue how much they can actually just attain really good health, and that, you know, that strong organisms tend to survive best in situations where high levels of stress are involved. And I think that this is no different. You were talking about earlier about how you have people that have neurodegenerative disorders. This is something that I'm assuming back when you were doing more physical therapy, you probably dealt with and you deal with now. What do you feel is the difference in terms of helping people with neurodegenerative disorders? Is the difference between utilizing traditional physio opposed to FP?
I think it's the same answer with people without neurodegenerative disorders as well. We address more variables, just straight up. That's the answer from my point of view, anyway. So, with something like a cerebral palsy client, for example, if a client came in to a physiotherapy consult, I'd be looking at him and going, look, let's do some muscle testing on the hip flexors. Let's say he's clearly stuck in a hip flexion all the time. Let's do some manual muscle testing. And we find out, look, the hip flexors are incredibly tight. So we'll do some release work, and then we'll try and do some bridges, and we'll cater it to his current mobility level, and we'll get some pain relief, and we might get some spasm relief. There might be a decrease in tone in that area, but it's not really, again, attacking the underlying issue. And I found with FP, I've had a couple of cerebral palsy clients come in, and a couple we've got some good results with, throwing and sitting to standing. And addressing multiple variables at once is still the main thing. Can we get him into a more neutral position? And is there going to be MFR involved? Probably. Is there going to be correctives involved? Yes, definitely.
Yep.
But addressing just the same thing I would with anyone that comes in the door: running, walking, throwing, standing, breathing. Basically, it's the same thing.
It's crazy, right? Because you just think about it, it's kind of like it's almost like a magic bullet, and I'm almost starting to use those words with it because it's because I've never found that there was ever a circumstance where if I could correct somebody's gait cycle or correct their throwing mechanics, and to some degree, or if I could like take elements of throwing or take elements of a person's gait cycle and correct it, that a person doesn't feel like tremendously better after the fact. Like the results are always substantial. But whenever I can't correct the problem of the gait cycle, that's when the person's pain doesn't go away. Do you find that that's kind of a similar situation with you?
Absolutely. The difficult clients are the ones where I'm not seeing that progress in a standing neutral or on a treadmill or with a particular task like a step press or something like that.
So why do you think that is? What's the like? Let's say because FP works with many people. It works. And I tend to find that if a person is kind of crazy enough in the right ways to want to really overcome their dysfunctions, that they usually end up overcoming their dysfunctions utilizing FP. That's my experience. Like I said, I'm not, and keep this in mind, many times people will say, I used to get this way back in the day, that much of what I talk about is anecdotal. So I'm kind of taking this outside of that realm. But do you find, like, how often is it that if somebody is not like really trying to fix their movement, that they actually fix their movement with their body? Are there circumstances where you have somebody who's really not that committed to fixing their biomechanics, where they do fix their biomechanics? Or does it happen, like, what's the percentiles, do you think, in terms of people who commit to changing their mechanics and seeing a change, and people who don't commit to changing their mechanics and seeing a change? Do you notice a difference?
This is a constant battle in my head, and I talk to the other boys about this all the time. So sometimes you'll get a client and you kind of punish yourself for it because you're like, I don't know enough. I'm not applying these tools correctly. What's going on? And sometimes that's the case. Sometimes we just need to be better. And that's only going to happen with time and exposure. But what I notice you asked for a percentage, the vast, vast majority, it will be upwards of 95%. If people go all in, they change. There's the occasional exception, but in the vast, vast majority,
where somebody's probably really, really screwed up, I'm assuming something mechanical. Exactly, and that's what I'm always trying to focus on my end, is like, how do I get to the deepest depths so that 5% remainder that's left over, I have a strategy to help them address their problem, which is what I'm always focusing on. But that's fascinating to me, and that's reassuring to me. It gives me chills because I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm like, so. If you're watching this right now, think about the implications of that. That if people just say, hey, look, I'm committed to changing my values as it relates to how I exercise and how I move my body and trying to change my mechanics, that there's a high probability that you will do this if you come at it from a real committed standpoint. That's fascinating to me. I think that's really cool. And I think I've spoken to other people as well who've kind of come to those same conclusions, but I think it's really cool in that regard. And does this happen at all levels? Does this translate to all levels, even with people who may have like CP, or people who are people who have pain, or even people pursuing athleticism? You find that this is kind of the same thing all across the board? Yeah.
So a good example would be during COVID, I had a couple of cricketers, because I train a lot of cricketers, and a couple of them they were doing FP, and they really knew that FP was the only way, but they were stuck in a strength and conditioning cycle with their respective competitive teams. And COVID, they just went all in. They couldn't do anything in the gyms. So they came to me, they bought cable machines, they set up a gym at home, and one guy increased, I can't remember the exact kilometers per hour, but it was 6 kilometers or something like that per hour in a few months. It was ridiculous. Like, just the immediate performance benefit. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the guys that during COVID, they couldn't work. So I was like, okay, get out in the sun. Look at what you're eating. Look at what you're doing. Look at how you're sleeping. Look at everything. Don't just look at one thing, because I think we might go into that later, but that is, I think, a problem with physio in general. We're looking at one thing a lot. And when people look at hundreds of things, in our case, hundreds of variables in the body, hundreds of variables in your lifestyle and environment, that's when stuff changes.
Yes. Well, so tell me about that. How do you deal with that circumstance? Because we do have people that are in FP who train athletes, and they bring that up. And obviously, we work with all sorts of different people, but that specific demographic. How have you dealt with an athlete being torn between what the teams are doing, which is mostly nonsensical, and what FP is doing? What do you like? What are the strategies do you take? Or are you kind of just saying, look, I'm going to help where I can?
Yes.
And I'm assuming you kind of just say, hey, look, I'll help where I can. And you're probably end up just being essentially a therapist for the athletes. Is that kind of safe to say? Or what's your situation like?
Yeah, usually when they come in now, they're already half converted just because we've been around for a while and they've had a word of mouth referral. So they at least know what they're coming into somewhat.
Yeah.
If they're doing strength and conditioning outside of it, I'll say, look, use the strength and conditioning not so much as a way to do it, just do it to pass your tests. So if you need to do a 2-kilometer time trial, if you need to do a particular amount of push-ups or planks, I'm just using random exercises here, but just do what you need to do to pass that. And then I'll teach you how to be better than that. That's pretty much where I've been with them.
And to anybody who's watching here, just realize that it's like, if you're ever going to try and get people to change, you're never going to typically have that happen, like a 180 turn immediately. You have to build trust with people. So if you're working with people, try not to force the change to happen.
Yeah.
I've operated in a very different perspective because I have people full on representing who I am and what I'm about, what FP is about. So I'm like, if I have representatives like supporting FP, they have to really be about it. How did you find FP? Like what exactly, like what was it that did you see an ad? Did you see a controversy? What was it that drew you in actually?
Well, just before we get to that, because this will lead into that, I think 50% of people come in either because they've hit rock bottom or because they've built enough trust slowly to go all in. Like that seems to be what I see.
Okay, so I don't want to hear about the rock bottom ones. What's the other 50%?
The 50% is exactly what you spoke about, that they've slowly built trust through you, if that makes sense. Exactly what you're talking about. So you show them through, but then they go, oh, I'm off to do a stretching class after, or I'm off to do some yoga after this, or I'll let the physio know what I'm doing next time I go see them, and then I'll come back and see you. And now we get to a stage where we go, okay, that's okay. We've told them about why we think this other stuff potentially isn't as beneficial.
Yep.
And over the weeks,
you don't say that right off the gate, though. I'm assuming you just kind of allow that process to happen until they can maybe see it. I'm assuming. Or?
Yeah, case by case, just depending on the person. If they're really staunchly for stretching, for example, we'll go, okay, this is why we think this isn't the best way, and here's an alternative. I think that's the biggest thing, is just what's the alternative. If someone has an addictive behavior, what's an alternative to that addiction that would be more functional, basically? Yes. And slowly, as they start to see the changes, and then a switch seems to flick in their brain and go, oh, like I was stretching every day and then I'd be in pain every morning the next day. Oh, that's what Lewis was talking about. That's what Shane and Max were talking about.
That's a funny thing, because I had out here in Kauai, I talked to different people, and I had somebody I was working with mention that, because she was like telling people like, she knows a lot of people that'll do yoga and things like that. And she'll mention, and they'll be like, hey, you should come to a yoga class with me or whatever. She'll be like, yeah, I don't want to do that because, it caused me a lot of pain. So I don't want to be operating in pain. So that's why I stay away from it. And at first they'll be like, oh, okay. But then within a few weeks, they begin to draw the correlation of saying, I don't think that people oftentimes think that the practice of stretching or yoga actually causes the pain most of the time. They're just kind of like, the pain is just kind of like inexplicable. It just comes and goes. But then when you kind of plant that seed, it seems to actually help them see, it helps them understand better, like what it helps them paint the picture of how to draw causality with their behaviors and how that's impacting the pain and the discomfort that they're feeling with their body. So I think it's fascinating. Keep this in mind. Lewis and the guys at Brisbane get amazing results. They get really, really solid results. And what I find right now with this conversation is that his mindset is exactly where it needs to be as it relates to getting the end result, because he's knowing how to work with the client. He's knowing when to plant the seeds where they need to be. And I think oftentimes when people are in FP, and they don't get the result, it's because they deviate kind of from that place of helping somebody transition themselves out of their less, I guess, functional behaviors or whatever it may be on a biomechanical and mental level and whatnot. But no, that's absolutely fascinating. I think it's interesting to see how you're drawing these same parallels to what I've learned in my experience.
Yeah, I think with that as well, we go to all these courses and we learn these ridiculously good techniques that are coming out. But someone, I think it was FP Maz on the Gold Coast, he said to me before the first HBS one that I went to, he said, just the techniques are awesome, but just learn the concepts. You said it at the course every time. And I have no doubt there's a lot of practitioners better than me at executing techniques, even at a HBS 2, human foundations level. But I think what we've really tried to drill into the guys at Brisbane is just nail fundamentals, and get clients to go all in. That seems to be the biggest thing.
That's what people don't think about when they're trainers or if they're therapists or whatever, is that you're actually behaviorists. You're trying to modify the behavior of an organism. That's what this is all about for me. So it's like, if you can't get a dog to go, if you can't cut them off right when they're going to elicit a bad behavior, the dog is going to misbehave. And I'm not saying that humans are dogs, but I say that we have behaviors that are very similar. We have the same triune brain as a dog. And so therefore, the way that we condition humans should be somewhat relatable to that. So I think it's, you hit the nail on the head when you said, yeah, don't think about techniques, think about concepts. And that's what I'm always drilling into people constantly. Concepts. Because if you understand the concepts, the first principles of it, the techniques kind of will come on their own.
Absolutely.
So really what I just try and do is I try and just make the painting bigger. I'm certain at some point at the end of this year, I'll be running an HBS 4 and you'll be coming to that, and then you'll see how I'm going to make the picture a lot bigger. And then you'll be like, oh, wow. You'll go back and you'll say, do I need to remember that technique that now he taught me to help me figure this out? Or is it more like, what's the concept here that he talked about? Is, okay, so we have a differential curve and then we have a continuous curve. Okay, how does that apply here? If you understand the concepts, that's how you make the changes. And what I think is also fascinating is that every time I talk to people who get really good results, they always go back to that same principle where they don't think about, oh, I need the magic technique, the magic bullet to help me fix a problem. Like I was getting decent results, pretty good results with people with material that I show people in HBS courses, with material that's 1,000 times worse than the stuff that I would teach at an HBS 1. And I got way better results because I look at it from a behavioral standpoint. And so that's just another, it's very cool to see those parallels drawing in and how the end results are tying in directly to like these same things that you're seeing, man. That's really cool.
If people just use the 10-week course alone, they should be able to get right on top of anything that they're having an issue with. Right? And let alone, I better do a shout out for the FTS, the functional training system.
How do you
downloaded
like it?
Downloaded that 3 weeks ago. Insane. Now he hasn't told me to say this, everyone. Like, it is insane. You need to get on it if you're not on it already.
It's really stupid. I mean, I was very proud of it when I got done with it. Like, hopefully you're able to take the material that's in that, and when you run courses, when you run techniques with your clients, the sequential aspects of what I cover in it have direct transferability towards creating mechanical propulsion with their bodies, right? So that's what I was hoping for, where it's like, when somebody does this, they're like, okay, my body's not moving the same as what it was afterwards. I mean, the 10-week course is great because it sets the base up. But the functional training system, I kind of wanted to push it a little bit because I know I haven't been able to work with you guys recently. So I was like, you know what? I want to throw something out there because I know when these guys get it, they're going to be like, I don't want it to be just some like, okay, some more basic stuff. There's some pretty advanced things that are in there. And yeah, man, I'm stoked to hear that you liked it. But yeah, I was really, the 10-week courses came out really good, but the functional training system, that one came out really, really good. The Parabar course coming up is going to be really cool too, bro. Once I get that one up, I think people are going to love that one too, man. So yeah, good stuff on the horizon. But anyway, how did you find FP?
Cool. Sorry.
Because this is what matters to me more than anything, man. It's like physiotherapists, if you're already successful in business and you've already attained a certain level of success in business, you're probably going to be less inclined to want to like investigate into something new. So unless like you're really gung-ho about wanting to get physical results with people, which I'm assuming at some level that was probably what drove you. So I may already be getting to it, but what was it that drove you? Why did you say, you know what, physiotherapy works? And to some level, it does work. It does help people diminish their pains. It does help people build more localized mobility in certain places, like more isolated mobility. It does work for those types of things. What along the path got you to be convinced of FP instead of continuing down the physiotherapy path?
Yeah, I was working in a private practice clinic, so seeing 60 to 70 clients per week, half-an-hour sessions, and it was an awesome place to work in terms of the environment. The boss was one of the best bosses I've ever had. The staff around me were really, really good. And I hated the work. I genuinely hated just the loop, basically, of just clients coming in. The repetitiveness, yeah. Clients were coming in 4 or 5 times. I was a glorified massage therapist. I tried to get people to do the exercises in the session, and I'd end up doing 25 minutes of hands-on work and then maybe 1 minute of an exercise I want them to do for the week.
Why? What was the reason for that? What was the end result that you would get after trying to do the exercise? Give me an example of a technique that you would utilize with a patient when you use it, like an actual physical exercise.
So I would do a manual muscle test on the gluteus medius in someone with back pain, and I would find that the gluteus medius was weak. Yes. I would do a clamshell. So for anyone who doesn't know what a clamshell, you'll lie on your side, your knees will be at 90 degrees, and you'll lift one leg up in the air to activate the gluteus medius. And it probably had a success rate of maybe 25, 30%, like immediately, which was, to be honest, is pretty good to get people out of pain pretty quickly. And so I'd send people home with that and go do it. And then they'd come back and then go, felt good for a few days, and it comes back. It's this same old story of just repetitiveness. And so it got to a stage where I was doing, 70 clients a week, up to about that many. And it would just be the same thing, just passive mobilization, a lot of massage, sometimes heat packs and TENS machines, like nerve stimulation, muscle stimulation, and one exercise at the end, go away, come back, repeat. And in my head, I go, I love working here in terms of the environment was really good. We had a good staff there, but I still don't like it. So there must be something wrong. And I'm helping the majority of people get out of pain, but the difficult ones I'm not getting to the root of. The ones that are coming twice a week for 10 weeks to get out of pain. And I can't figure out what's going on. And I think for me at the same time, I played a lot of cricket myself, and never at a level where I would have gone anywhere with it, but I was good enough to get a contract to play over in England. So I went and played a season over there, and admittedly my lifestyle was terrible. I was playing cricket Saturday, Sunday. I'd come back on a Monday I'd take a flight on a Monday to Spain, and I would go to Spain for the week. I'd party, I'd drink, I'd stay up late. And then I'd come back on the weekend to play cricket again. And amongst all that, I was doing a couple of gym sessions a week, lifting traditional weights, and I pretty much broke down. So I won't go through all my injury history, but the biggest ones were a stress reaction and stress fracture on my left adductor on the pubic bone. I had a full supraspinatus tear, which is a rotator cuff muscle for those watching, on my right, amongst about 7 or 8 other muscle tears, joint problems, blah, 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 blah. So when I came back from England, everything kind of broke. And that was at the same time, it just seemed to time up where I couldn't really help the difficult clients. And I thought, if I can't help myself and I can't help these difficult clients, and I think I'm a pretty good physio at this point. I thought I really helped people. I was like, what's the next step here? So I investigated a few different systems without naming any. And there were some benefits to them in terms of pain relief, but again, I just kind of left wanting. And then I remember one day, I actually remember the first time I had a couple of hours off between clients and turned on YouTube, and I think it was some plyometric kettlebell work you were doing. And I was trying it in the hallway of the different physio rooms, and there was a curtain to do with them. And there's people in all these rooms getting release work done. And I'm literally got this, I think it was a 2-kilo dumbbell, just trying to kettlebell plyo my way up and down the corridor. Yeah. And that was the first time I found it. And look, at that point, I wasn't like, oh, well, my pain's gone. But I thought, look, this is worth getting into. He's talking about things that I'm interested in. He's talking about posture. No one talks about that. So I got out of that job and I said, look, I'm going to take this contract right up in North Queensland. And for those who don't know, Queensland's huge, huge, huge. It's an 8-hour drive, and it hardly touched a point on the map away from Brisbane. So it's a big drive, but a big space. And I did a 10-week contract up there. And I don't know if the length of the contract was perfect for this, but at the same time, I just thought, let's download the 10-week course. Let's have a go. And I was working in an aged care facility, which was quite an easy job, good money because it was rural. I'd finished work at about 2 p.m. in the afternoon. I signed up at the local gym and I just started going through the 10-week course. I said, ditch everything you've done so far to get to this point because it's clearly not working. Ditch everything you know that you can. I think that's impossible, but try and just filter off all the physio brain and let's just absorb what this course kind of does. And in that, probably in the first, 4 to 5 weeks of the course, which is predominantly myofascial release and kind of postural related stuff, I reckon I got rid of 60-70% of my pain, which I had no other way of getting rid of. I had not found that in the past. So that was pretty cool. And after the end of that 10-week course, I went, look, this is worth looking into, signed up for Human Foundations in New Zealand. And then the rest is history. Like I just went, all right, I'm all in here. Yeah.
That's awesome, bro. That's amazing. It gets me a little bit emo thinking of it's amazing seeing how passionate people are about wanting to solve their problems, because it's so easy for us in our society to kind of just be like, I'll just put it aside. I'll put it aside. I guess what do you feel prompted you to say, what the hell, I'm going to do this 10-week course? What do you feel was the catalyst that got you to say that? Was it just the stars aligned at the right time, or did you already have it on the back of your mind? What was going on in your head when you finally decided to take that leap of logic?
I think the timing mattered massively. I think the timing of me not enjoying my job in terms of what I was doing, me not getting the results with my clients, at the same time, me breaking down, me living a dysfunctional lifestyle as well. I think just everything kind of like lined up perfectly. It sounds a bit like hippie, but that's the way it felt.
That's crazy, man. That's amazing. So, wow, that's crazy. So what do you find right now that's one of the biggest struggles that you have working with clientele? Like, let's say, like, how many people come to you really wanting to fix their mechanics these days? And if first and foremost, that's the first question. How often do people come in saying, I want to fix my biomechanics? And what's the main reason people come and see you?
Still predominantly pain. Definitely pain. I think the hardest part is when people come in and rightly so, they want to tell you their story. They come in and they go, look, I've seen 7 to 10 people before. I know what's wrong with me. And we're like, but if you knew, you probably wouldn't be in this scenario. If you truly knew what was going on, you probably wouldn't be here. So I think our initial consult when people come in is about 90 minutes long. And I'm really proud of how we do it. Like it's run really well. We get people in, we put them on a treadmill, and we get them to do their standing photos. And people always want to tell you their story first. And as long as they've signed their waiver now, so just from a legal point of view, it's like, okay, nothing in them getting on this treadmill is going to hurt them, or nothing. We don't need to worry about anything else. So that's all taken care of. And what I say to the client is, look, just give me a minute. I don't want tunnel vision on this. If you tell me you've got a history of shoulder problems and then tell me 10 minutes of stuff about the shoulder, when I'm looking at your running, when I'm looking at your standing posture, I'm just going to like do that and look at the shoulder. So I'm like, we'll get to that. It's absolutely important what your history is. But for the moment, I just want you to run on this treadmill if you're able to, walk on this treadmill, take some standing posture, and then we take them straight to a computer and we load up Usain Bolt, Barry Sanders, for about probably 10 to 15 minutes. We get them to watch those two. Usually Bolt to start with, just because the images are clearer, the video is clearer. And we take them through what he's doing. And still they're trying to interject and go, and that's fine. Again, I understand why they do it. They try and interject and go, oh, that's where I feel pain. And I go, that's not yet. Let's just watch this. Look at how he does this. Look at how he does this. Look at the ratios between this. And then I take it to them. And I think that's the biggest part we attribute our success to here anyway, or part of it anyway, is just showing people that difference. People don't necessarily need all these crazy anatomical terms. They just need to see how bad they move compared to what they could be doing.
So with that said, how often do you find yourself like explaining like biomechanical jargon? Like how often do you need to do that?
Very, very rarely will I need to do traditional anatomy with people. If someone, a really, really uncoordinated client who's in a lot of chronic pain, may occasionally need an explanation of an attachment and an insertion of a muscle. So say someone cannot get length tension on their hamstring, I might put a band there and go, this is where the attachment of the hamstring is. This is where the insertion is. This is the area where I need you to feel tension lengthening. And that's about the extent of the anatomical knowledge I learned at university that I use. The rest of it is movement-based. And definitely from a movement point of view.
So essentially what you're trying to, if I get this right, what you try and focus on is getting people to improve the ratios between the moving parts in their body. And that's the primary focus that you put forth.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. Continue. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, in that rare occasion, I'll need to do that. That will happen. Otherwise, it's all about teaching them the lingo of FP. So they'll need to learn tilting. They'll need to learn shifting. They'll need to learn flexing, extending, that stuff. But we'll show them Bolt. We'll show them Barry Sanders. We'll show them themselves on a treadmill. And then we'll go, this is the difference. Can you see it? And if they can't, we'll highlight it again. And this process might take 35, 40 minutes of the first session. And at the end of it, they're like, whoa, no one's ever shown me that. I mean, I've got a cricketer that plays for Australia. Literally one of the best batsmen in the world, which is crazy considering there's a billion people in India that play it. And
yeah.
And these guys haven't seen themselves running slow-mo on a treadmill before.
Well, I mean, it's obvious why, though, Lewis, when you think about it, who's even wanting to look at that? I remember when I was trying to set up the debate with Brett Contreras a few years back, he had challenged me again, and I was like, okay, I'm game, let's do it. But then, like, when it came down to actually doing it, he wasn't very inclined to want to talk about it. And so I think he had seen the results, and he's like, this isn't the same circumstance that we dealt with way back in the day. And so I'm like, and so I was like, what the heck? What's the deal? Let me see what this guy's talking about in his lectures and whatnot. Essentially, what he had concluded, and pretty much what the entire strength and conditioning and even a rehab community had concluded, is like, there's no sense in looking at the whole body when it comes to gait. There's no point in it because it's too complicated to try and figure out. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, it is complicated, but I think we simplified it well enough to where you can make a change on a person's gait cycle. I mean, how much is up to question, and we have to obviously get better with it. But I that is a fascinating thing when you think about it. It's like, why wouldn't somebody show you walking or running if it's the most fundamental thing you're ever going to do? And this is a professional athlete too, which is even crazier because they have to run, right?
All the time.
In cricket,
if they can't, they're not
it's freaking mind blowing. This is amazing though, man. What I just think is crazy, it's like, and not to sound all hippie and whatnot, but how there are synchronicities between people who get results and the approaches they use to get those results. Like, it's crazy because I don't really get to run a facility anymore. I got to do that back in like 2000 to about 2010, 2011, all the way to about like 2013, 2014, till I got into this point of like, okay, now I'm going to start like training like trainers and training physical therapists and whatnot. But essentially the approach that you're taking is very similar to the approach that I was actually trying to employ back in the day with lesser techniques, obviously. So I have the sophistication you guys have is way beyond like what I had back in the day. But I just think it's fascinating that you're adopting that mindset for it. And if anybody's watching this, like, really pay attention to what Lewis is saying here, because he's very successful in employing FP. They get phenomenal results. I only hear great things that come out of that facility. And subsequently, he's following all the necessary protocols to help a customer become successful when they come into to walk into his doors. I also think it's fascinating that you don't get into complicated jargon, because I do tend to find that what people do when they can't figure out a concept is they hide behind complexity. And when you deviate from the complex and you try and simplify everything, it makes things really awkward. But in the same token, it's like you get to a place where you actually solve problems. And so that's another point of fascination for me, that you also that I've concluded that you're not teaching much about anatomy. Now, with that said, if a person does want to learn about anatomy, does that help them at all? Or is that, do you find any correlation between them wanting to learn the anatomy and get better? Or do you find that to be fairly unimportant?
To a point. So I'll use the example of me here. I mean, going through, I know how much more I have to learn. So that's why we try and keep it so simple and do the fundamentals so well. But I've gotten to a point now, obviously having done a few courses, where it almost seems to get in the way. Like we've got a new practitioner doing some classes with us, and she comes from no history of doing much training with people, and she's seeing things on before and afters that I'm just not seeing, because I'm looking at this 2D structure with a skeleton and then a bone and then a
crazy, bro.
And she's just here just going like, oh, this is doing this and this is doing this and this is, and I'm like, whoa, like, okay, like let's listen to what. So I almost have to unlearn it a little bit before I learn again. Yeah,
crazy, bro. That's
helps
amazing.
To a point, but yeah,
no, don't get me wrong. Like I visualize. The weird thing is when I start figuring out start tampering around, like let's say if I go to the beach and, Kathy will be looking at me at the beach, like just tweaking around and looking like a weirdo. But I'll start like employing different concepts. I visualize anatomy, but it's like a different way of visualizing. I don't feel like I visualize bones. It's almost like I tie my brain to my fascia and nervous system. And I try and it's almost like create waves inside my kinetic chain, but there's not really anatomy associated to it. Like I've been more detached from anatomy than ever in the last, what the heck has it been? Don't get me wrong, I still go back to it. I think skeletal anatomy almost makes more, these days, skeletal anatomy seems to be more beneficial when I look at the junction between two joints and I visualize like how oppositional rotation may need to happen, how shearing angles, shearing forces, bending forces, torsional forces need to happen. I see like looking at the skeletal system almost makes more sense in certain circumstances. But even beyond that, like I'll look at the skeletal system, but I almost just look at the parts of the body moving. I look for ripples everywhere that I possibly can. I look for waves. I look for like the ratios between the joints in terms of moving in the body. I look for those things, but I find myself, again, deviating from the anatomy. Not that it doesn't matter, because it does. You need to know where the brachial plexus nerve is. You need to know where the femoral artery is. These are things that you need to know on the body just to make sure that you don't hurt somebody. But after a certain point, you begin to realize, like, is biomechanics that complicated? It is complicated, don't get me wrong, but everything always defaults back to, at least for me, and you can let me know if you feel the same way or not, but everything always defaults back to never getting away from the basics, from the fundamentals. Yeah. It's always about going back to fundamentals, literally every single session. It's if I was that my last session wasn't as fundamental as what my next session is going to, like my next session is always going to be more fundamental than my last one. Are you feeling that same way, or?
I'm moving towards that way every day. And it's a hard thing to do because you see some of these pracs just absolutely slinging stuff around the world. I'm like, I just want to do that. But I'm like, no, you'll get there. But it's just where you talked about the investing thing before, where we're not day trading FP. Like we're on the longest time frame you can be on.
Yes,
literally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've got 100-year hodls basically.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And no, bro, you're like nailing it. So if you guys are in the crypto space, yes, we are long-term hodlers. We're biomechanics hodlers. Yeah. That's really where we're at. Bro, if it helps you and it encourages you at all, Lewis, continue down that path, because the further you go down this, bro, you're going to be like, whoa, I'm glad that I held out, because at some point you're going to become a crypto biomechanical billionaire at some point. And when it comes, it feels really good. I'm not there yet myself, but I feel like I'm moving in that direction. And so obviously as the education continues and whatnot, I keep taking you guys through the work, you'll see like more and more why that patience matters. So yeah, if you guys are only FP auditors here, that's awesome, bro. I love it. Just somebody commented that right now. But yeah, man, it's amazing. This is like been it's almost therapeutic to hear you talk, Lewis, because it helps me become more sane. Yeah, it's awesome. By the way, what are you invested in, if you don't mind me asking, as it relates to crypto?
Yeah, so ADA definitely, Cardano is definitely one.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, for sure.
Hilarious.
There's a couple of other, I mean, when you look at some of this stuff that's a millionth of a cent, you really are speculating. So I think there's a point where you do need to do, if you're trading long term, you need more fundamental proof.
Have you looked at Solana by any chance?
I'm in Solana as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just looked at that yesterday. I was looking at that and I'm like, huh. It seems like it's a really interesting space, the crypto market. And I think it's like, it does spell that we are moving more towards a type 1 civilization. And at first I was very hesitant to doing it because I'm like, money. I'm like, do we really want to go down this damn rabbit hole? But it seemed like there are some projects that are out there that seem to be really concerned with like the affairs of where society is going. And I'm concerned about it from the sense that if you decentralize the wrong way, that you could literally create a whole bunch of new problems. For me, what I like about Charles Hoskinson, what he talks about is that whole idea of governance. Like, how are you going to organize this? Like, is this going to be are we going to have representatives, or is this going to be a full-on democracy? And if you're going to have a democracy with people like me who don't really know anything about crypto, how mining really works, or how the system really works, and you allow me to vote, then what's really you see what I mean?
Yeah, you give power to everyone. That's dangerous.
And that's the problem. That's the qualm that I have with the crypto space, is where I'm like, do we really know what we're doing? But it's nonetheless, I think it's still good to have there to kind of as a hedge on the current systems that we have right now, just to keep them honest. So I think I do find it that it's interesting that there's more people that are writing like Cardano.
Funny comments.
That's hilarious.
FP token.
FP token, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to, if I ever talk to Charles Hoskinson, I'll maybe think about that. But I don't think I'm all about. There are FP tokens. It's about altering your mechanics and having a higher redox potential. That's the tokens that I'm most concerned about, man. But yeah, Lewis, we all have to do this again. This was an amazing conversation, bro. I'm so pumped to see what you're doing out there, the way that you're representing. It's no surprise talking to you why you're attaining the levels of success that you are, and that your success is going to continue, man. I'll do everything on my part to make sure that I funnel clientele your way, people your way, so you can continue to change lives. And obviously, the goal is to build this ecosystem within FP and get everybody on board with just functioning better. And so as time moves forward, I have future plans on what I want to do to try and get the information more readily available for you guys. So I'm working on it. So for anybody who's watching this right now, I'm working on that. The crypto space might make this a more secure outlet to pull this off, by the way. So I think that maybe that in the future might help us make it to where I can make more of the information available through online means and whatnot. But I'm going to keep working on my end to get as much information out there. But I already know you're out there discovering things, looking at the concepts, man. So keep getting after it, bro. I'm super pumped to see what you guys are doing out there, man. I couldn't be more proud to have you as a representative and doing the work that you guys are doing, man. So keep up the great work, brother.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate everything you and you guys are doing. And hopefully this is more for people on the fence. Like, I've been in both positions. I've been the physio and now I'm here, and I'm telling you, like, it's a better way. So even if it just requires you looking at some videos online, watching some Jack Fresco, doing whatever, like just start it off. Just, dip your toe in and you'll notice, the changes are going to come.
Yeah, man. It's pretty sweet, man. Thank you so much for coming on, man. We'll have to do this again in the future.
Thanks, Natty. Appreciate it.
Take care, brother. Have a good one, man.
See you, man. Have a good one.
Later, bro. Bye.